2016. That was the year my family bought me an Xbox One. It took me long enough, but I finally got into the next generation of games, and the bundle I got came with 4 games. Halo 5, the game I most wanted, Gears of War Ultimate Edition, Rare Replay, and a download code for a curious little title called Ori and the Blind Forest. I knew nothing about it, had never heard about it, didn't even know what genre it was. I didn't care either, I just wanted to play Halo. Months later in the summer, after I had gotten my fill of all the other games, I looked at the Xbox dashboard, not sure what I wanted to play. Then, my eyes wandered outside my TV and towards the entertainment center. There, I had haphazardly thrown the download code for Ori and the Blind Forest. I thought, what the hell, I'll play it for a bit, get the gist, and then move on to something else. What I expected was a simple indie game. What I got? Was one of the best games I have ever played. Ori and the Blind Forest is something special to me. It's a game that captivated me like no other. It's one of the rare games that I replay just because, and it opened my eyes to the magic and wonder of games. Ori came at a time where I was growing up, where I was well versed in game design and I thought I had seen everything the industry had to offer, which is why it's all the more incredible that it wowed me like it did. Ori is more than just one of my favorite games of all time, it's a work of art. Why is that? Well, let me tell you. Let me tell you why Ori and the Blind Forest is art. Roll credits. Playing games for the graphics is like watching porn for the story. George Washington, 1694, the day the US Civil War began. Seriously though, this quote goes around a lot when discussing graphics, and I agree with it to an extent, but the greatest counter-argument to this lies with Ori and the Blind Forest's stellar art direction. I mean, just look at it. The art style is unlike anything I've ever seen. Beautiful doesn't even come close to describing it, and just looking at it, it's hard to even talk about one thing when everything is so gorgeous. To talk about why the art is incredible, we need to break it down, and to do so, let's look at the title character, Ori. So Ori's species is never defined, but by looking at it we can see its shape is similar to that of a fox's, yet it combines elements of many other animals, like the ears of a bunny and the tail of a cat. Looking at it closer, you'll even see it has hooves on its feet and tiny horns on its head. All in all, Ori is a creation distinctly familiar, yet all its own. That is of course just how it looks. How it's animated is the other part of the equation, and it matches that same quality. Ori moves like liquid, flowing seamlessly from running to jumping to climbing and back again, making it just as fun to look at him as it is to play him, and we'll get to the playing part soon. So in just this tiny character, a lot of thought has gone into its design and animation. But the reason I stopped to focus on the one character is because that same level of thought has gone into every single asset you see on screen, from the gorgeous backgrounds to the intricate foreground and simple but effective enemies. The background in particular is a standout, as it's been stated by the creators of the game that each and every single object seen there is wholly original and the only time in the entire game you'll see those objects. If someone wants to prove them wrong, be my guest, but something tells me you'll either fail or spend an extremely long time looking for that one repeated asset. This is an impressive feat, but combined with the fact that this is a Metroidvania, a game type where you explore a massive interconnected world, the fact that everything is never repeated makes the game world feel rich with life and personality. I often just stop in one area and look off into the distance just to admire the scenery. I'm very much an ADHD type gamer. I like to run past everything to get to the meat of the game, be it the next battle or story section. But the art of Ori and the Blind Forest is so gorgeous that it forces even me to stop and admire it. This game, more than any other, has made me want to get an Xbox One X and 4K TV just so I can play it at the absolute highest fidelity, because the best resolution and frame rate deserve the best artwork. I can say without hesitation, Ori and the Blind Forest is the most beautiful game ever made. If we were going by looks alone, Ori would be the best game of all time, but looks aren't everything. You need a good story if you want to keep people's attention. The story is arguably the center of every work of art, even video games. Without a story to watch or play through, then the only point of a work of art is to appreciate it for its sake, which is possible, but difficult. Thankfully, Ori and the Blind Forest reminds us that the greatest tales are often the most simple. The game centers on the titular Ori, an offspring from a magical spirit tree that is the center of all life in the forest of Nibel. One day, Ori is whisked away during a great storm and is taken in by a denizen of the forest, a lovable mother named Naru. The two live happily together until tragedy strikes. An owl named Kuro steals the light of Nibel, throwing the elements out of balance and leaving the forest withering and dying. Just as the light fades from Ori, the spirit tree gives its life to Ori, and now with the help of Light's spirit sign, Ori must journey across the land to restore the three elements and bring back balance to the forest. Ori's story is told like a classic fable, simple to understand, but rich with thematic depth. The characters, for example, are not numerous and incredibly simple, but that means that they're distinct, memorable, and, many times, adorable. Not much may happen in terms of plot, but the themes that run through deep. The game deals with ideas of motherhood, life, death, compassion, anger, empathy, and how we're all connected in this grand, gorgeous, scary world. Some people may want more out of a story, more things happening, more twists and turns, but the way I see it, it's like Cinderella compared to Hamlet. Both are classic stories, but Cinderella is great for its emotional simplicity and Hamlet is great for its emotional complications. However, there's no doubt that Cinderella will appeal to people of all ages, while Hamlet is more likely to be appreciated at an older, more mature age. And I'm talking about stage adaptations, not The Lion King. That's the way I see the game. It's simple, but beautiful, and it makes this tale of love and nature all the more memorable. One last note, that opening segment would not be out of place in a Pixar film because, wow, unbelievable. But enough about the aesthetics and the story, let's talk the actual gameplay. I'd argue that control is the most important part of any game. Lousy control makes an entire video game unplayable as you spend the entire time wrestling with what button does what instead of dealing with the actual challenge put before you. You'd think that with such a tried and true formula as a 2D side-scroller that there isn't much room for evolution, but that's just one of the dozens of ways that Ori shatters expectations. I played this on an Xbox One controller and the controls just melted into my hands. Everything is so natural and seamless, making the precision platforming of the game tricky but fair. The best thing that any game can do as far as control is make you feel like the character. Whether you're bouncing around in Mario Odyssey, flying around like a maniac in Devil May Cry, or executing a long combo in a fighting game, having that sort of embodiment of your character through the controls is vital and so satisfying. And it's that satisfaction that is all throughout Ori and the Blind Forest, as you jump and climb and launch all throughout the world. Arguably the best thing about Ori is its satisfying abilities. As with all Metroidvanias, you start out with nothing. You can jump, and that's it. As the game goes on, you gain new abilities to help you traverse the world. This isn't anything new for a Metroidvania, but what makes Ori stand out is that literally all of the abilities you unlock are movement-based, and thus as the game goes on, you have more and more tools to navigate the world and take on enemies. The slow drip feed of these abilities and the sections that follow that teach you how to use them all ensure that by the end of the game you're a spiritual ninja, bashing off enemies, launching yourself like a rocket, and having tons of fun doing it. The only complaint I have with Ori is that you're very light, which makes sense both story-wise and gameplay-wise, but it does sometimes lead to overshooting on some platforms. It works best when you're in the air, which thankfully this game has a lot of. Also, some abilities either lose relevance with the introduction of new ones, or are really hard to pull off, although in the case of the latter one, that's only with the Definitive Edition and Light Burst. All in all, Ori controls like a dream, which is great because that means that the levels you traverse are incredibly fun to go through. Seriously, it is disgusting the creativity and genius that has gone into designing these levels. Like the art style, I don't even know where to begin, so let's start with the basics and work our way up. As stated before, the game is a Metroidvania, where you explore an interconnected map. Locations are locked off until you gain a certain ability that lets you access it, or you find some game-breaking technique or glitch that lets you skip it all. I'll admit this is the weaker part of Ori's level design. It's not bad or frustrating, but it is basic. There's little room to explore starting out, and later on there's rarely a time where backtracking is encouraged unless you want to gain some extra goodies. Because the location is always marked on your map, there's really no sense of wonder and discovery, you just go to where it says. Ultimately, however, it does its job, that being a way to move to and from areas seamlessly and looking beautiful while it's at it. The obstacles in there are quite good, there's always something to keep you on your toes, and heading back to places you've been but much more powerful with new abilities under your belt is always one of the joys of this genre. Where the game comes into its own is when you get to the main areas you need to progress. These places are a little more closed off, but the result is that they present you with carefully designed challenges that are unique to their certain area. Trapped in dark caverns, traversing a fog-filled swamp, or floating in the air with the Valley of the Wind. These areas are incredibly memorable and fun to go through as you try and figure out the path forward. These places are actually fun to get lost and explore, compared to the rest of the parts of the game. Eventually you'll find out which is the way to go and you'll enter one of the game's main dungeons. These sections are locked off from the rest of the game, which some might consider cheating, but the result is that the designers are free to do whatever the hell they want. And the result? Some of the best designed levels of all time. The Jinso Tree, Forlorn Ruins, Mount Horror. The best description I've seen of these levels is from the YouTube channel Game Maker's Toolkit, where Mark Brown says,
"It's kind of like the combination between a Zelda dungeon and a Super Meat Boy level."
First of all, each one is incredibly distinct. From the layout to the way forward to its colors and themes means that there's no mistaking one for the other. Second, the challenges they present are so clever and cool that you wish the entire game was built around such mechanics. Portals that move you from place to place, gravity being every which way but down, a gauntlet of platforms and bullets. They're all distinctive, they're all difficult, and they're all incredibly satisfying to play and conquer. I don't have time to discuss even just one in super great detail, so I highly recommend the Game Maker's Toolkit video, Deconstructing Ori and the Blind Forest's Best Bit, which breaks down one of these levels. These levels could have been the best ever made, if not for one tiny, little, inconsequential thing that is kind of the worst thing ever. The escape sequences. You see, when you do what it is you need to do in each of the dungeons, it ends in a sequence where you have to escape the crumbling area. And oh my god, these sequences are so ridiculously, needlessly, stupidly difficult for no reason, and it kinda makes me want to scream. Okay, there is a reason. Hear me out. These are essentially this game's boss battles, so it makes sense that they're way harder than usual. The challenge means that when you finish it, it shows that you're the man, and they're pretty cool set pieces all around. But Christ, the problem with these sequences is that they're do or die and have no room for error. You miss a jump, you start the entire sequence again. That wouldn't be so bad except for the fact that you have no way to predict what's coming next. Even in the Jinso Tree escape, where you just have to go up, you never know where or what you're going to need to do, meaning you have a split second to adapt and react or you're toast. And this problem is compounded even further in the following escape sequences. We have to go up, down, sideways, wherever to escape, meaning you may think you're going the right way only for you to get exploded. Especially here. Seriously, the first time I came here, I thought I was doing something wrong. These rocks fall, covering the entire space, and I thought, there's no way to dodge this. I can't do anything. You know what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to hide in this tiny friggin' spot, let the rocks fall, and then keep going. How are you supposed to figure that out your first time through, let alone when you're in a goddamn hurry trying not to get eviscerated? I get what the developers were going for with these sequences. And ultimately, while very frustrating, they're decently designed and memorable. But to be honest, they do bring down the experience for me. It's the only thing in this game that I can definitively point to and say, that was terrible. Which is a shame, considering that's not true for the rest of the game. The difficulty going through is high, yes, but it remains steady. You'll die and you'll die often, but as long as you remember to save with your Soul Link ability, you just have to survey the situation and react accordingly, something that the escape sequences don't allow you to do. But regardless, the game is fair for the most part, and while some sections are annoying, you'll mostly have a good challenge that makes you feel awesome when you finally conquer it. And hey, these are only small parts of the game. Most of it will be spent through intricately designed, well-executed platforming levels. Tying the game together is one of the best video game soundtracks in recent memory, which I was just so happening to be listening to while writing this review, who would have thought? Like the rest of the game, the soundtrack is perfectly engineered to be incredible, but I'd argue that it goes even further. Listen to the main theme. Close your eyes. Let the melody wash over you. Let it seep into your brain. You feel that? That's not an eyelash in your eye. That's tears. Composer Gareth Coker has done something special with this score, and through some witchcraft or simply pure talent, has made this OST a tearjerker. Not a track goes by that doesn't want to drive you to cry, and that's without taking into account the sad things that actually happen in the game. Combine the two, and you're just a well of tears. Aside from being incredibly emotional, the soundtrack also does what any good soundtrack worth its salt should do: stand out. So many scores in video games blend in nowadays, failing to distinguish themselves from each other. Not bad, but they do mesh together. Ori's piano melodies, unique instruments, and haunting yet beautiful vocalizations, combined with Gareth Coker's incredible composition, make the soundtrack oh so delicious. The vibe you get is of a mystical, otherworldly land, lush with life and beauty. And lo and behold, that just so happens to be the world you inhabit. Coker has said in a Reddit MMA that he sought to make the soundtrack Nibelian, with Nibel being the name of a land. In other words, he wanted it to sound like it could only come from this game. Needless to say, he succeeded with flying colors. Art direction, story, controls, design, soundtrack. Just one of these elements being good isn't enough to make a great game. Having several of them be good leads to a great time. Having all of them be of the utmost caliber leads to an experience that few games ever reach. And yet, this isn't what makes Ori so great. What makes this game art isn't how these elements work in isolation. It's how they work in tandem. It's how they work to create a unique experience and deliver a message that only this game can do. And when they do, Ori is a beautiful, dreamlike experience. The developers have said that this game is, by and large, a coming-of-age story. When Ori comes into this world, he is a child, weak, alone, and frightened. He's unable to fight by himself, having to use sign to fend off enemies, and he's incredibly weak, being killed in 1 or 2 hits. And this state is reflected in the way you play. You're a tiny thing having to fight giant, disgusting creatures, and forced to take on a brutal gauntlet of platforming and combat challenges. But as you go on, you get better. You understand the mechanics more intimately, you gain extra life and energy points, you acquire new abilities, and you begin to understand the people you meet and figure out why they do what they do. The enemies get stronger, the challenge is more difficult, but you in turn become more resilient and smarter. By the end of the game, Ori is all grown up, having faced death time and again, but overcoming it every single time. And likewise, you, the player, have grown up, having become a master at the game. You've seen the world at its best and at its worst. You've seen it at its most beautiful and most terrifying. You've experienced unbearable loss and unbelievable joy. And through it all, you've stepped up, faced the hardships head on, and no matter how scary, how horrible the next thing might be, you keep going, because that's how you grow up. That's how life is. People make jokes all the time on how Ori made them cry. Ori and the Bucket of Tears is one of my favorites. And while the story and the music are no doubt what makes people tear up, I think the game hits at something deeper. Through gorgeous visuals and satisfying gameplay, Ori manages to tell a story that is deeply personal and relatable. It's not just an escape from the modern world, it's not just a dopamine trigger to make us momentarily happy. It makes something that only games can ever really do, and that is have us embody a character and through it learn more about ourselves and each other. And when it's all done, when it's time to unplug as it were, we feel sad because we have to leave. But likewise, we've matured too. We become a little stronger and more prepared. At least, that's how I feel looking back on it. And I think that a video game gave me that emotional experience. I think that's kind of incredible. To me, what makes something art is not just whether it looks beautiful or not, but what it makes you feel. If something can be studied, looked back upon, be dissected, and most importantly, be an emotional experience, that makes it art. The art direction of this game is a work of art in of itself. The story is another piece of art. So is the design, so is the music. Individually, they are all artful in one way or another. This is a game that mixes all these elements together. That's what makes this a masterpiece. All of this from a $20 downloadable game that I unwittingly bought, had absolutely no expectations for, and thought I would only play for 10 minutes. That's pretty awesome. That's why Ori and the Blind Forest is art.